So you have to do a lot of capacity building before you start to analyze vulnerability. And the other one is to be clever about your solutions and think about what they call sort of win-win solutions. So for example, I mentioned about these blue swimming crabs. We know that they're really, really important as a livelihood resource. Like in some of the communities, virtually everybody is catching these blue swimming crabs. And we know they're already really, really degraded. And we know that under climate change, they're probably going to have more problems with this particular resource. If we can do things already to improve the population of this particular species of crab, definitely the community is interested, because they're going to make more money today. If they can catch more crabs, they're going to make more money today. But at the same time, we're reducing their risk in the future. Now what we don't know, because like I was saying, the marine scientists haven't done their homework yet, we don't know if this particular species of crab is going to have a big problem as a result of climate change in this particular part of Thailand. We know that things like crabs and shrimps, when the sea becomes more acidic, they might have difficulty forming and developing. We know that that's a risk. But anyway, if we can increase the capacity of the community to manage themselves, to manage their own environment, to look after not just the crabs, but the mangrove, the seagrass and the coral, if in the future the crabs do have a problem, that community already has a lot more capacity, yeah? They're already managing their own fate now, instead of just waiting for something to happen. So if eventually we get some university in Thailand does some research and it says, yeah, this crab, you know, whatever you do, however much you increase the population, in 10 years' time under climate change, it's not going to be there. Okay, never mind. We have a really strong community. They have a lot of capacity for natural resource management. They can change. They can move on to something else.
All right, let's move now to our next, I would say last topic, which is a way of communicating risks through maps. And while we're waiting for everyone to come up, I want you all to stand up please with a pen in your hand. We have one little exercise. Please stand up. Because I'm seeing that everybody's getting a little bit sleepy. Not deep? No? Okay. So we have one little exercise that is, I'm not going to say what it's about, but I want you to hold up your pen in the air in front of you. And counterclockwise, you're going to make a spiral. Am I counterclockwise, you're going to make a spiral and go down and keep looking at your pen the whole time. You're going to go down, keep looking at your pen below your waist. You're going to observe if your pen is still going the same direction, counterclockwise, or did it change to going clockwise? So try it again, okay? So you start from the top, you're going to go counterclockwise, and you're going to continue looking at the pen all the way down, and see if you think is what happens with the pen and the direction. Is anybody noticing if it changed direction, or is it still going counterclockwise? Is it still going counterclockwise? Okay. All right. Try it one more time. Maybe if we go, I'm going to change direction now and go clockwise. See if it works with you. Clockwise. Is it changing direction when it goes, anything changing? No? For some people it changes direction when you go down. No, maybe you guys are all so intelligent that it's not happening to you. In all the other groups, you are above average intelligence. It didn't work. Okay, you are above average. Did it change direction? So, okay, I'm not seeing. We have one normal person here. Okay, so normally actually it's difficult to keep the same perspective. Okay, the idea with this exercise was to see if it changes perspective when you're looking up, and sometimes when you look away, you look down, it could change things. Something that's supposed to be constant actually changes perspective. Okay, we can work on this at night and then okay, but I'm glad to know that we have an above average intelligent group here and some normal people as well. Okay, thank you for trying. All right, Iman, I'd like to, I'm very happy that you're here today. Iman is one of our partners. By the way, if you don't have one of these little brochures that has a nice poster, you can give to your kids or put it up in your office, and it has some more information on Header. So Iman is one of our partners, one of our 14 partners from the Nature Conservancy. And what is your title? I'm afraid I didn't ask you.
It's okay. I'm Director of International Marine Policy.
Director of International Marine Policy. So please, Iman, go ahead. You're going to tell us about resilience.
Yes, I'm going to give you a couple of examples in two different places, one in the US and one in the Solomon Islands, and I chose both extremes of the spectrum in terms of development to show you how you can deal with interactive decision support tools to actually apply. It's very complementary to what James was talking about. How do you put together the information about, social vulnerability, ecosystem consideration, and economic considerations, addressing both climate change and risks to inform decision making at various levels, be it national, regional, or community. This is pretty much the framework that we're using. Agree totally that we need to start with raising awareness, and certainly mapping tools help visualize some of the climate impacts and disaster impact, assessing risk in terms of hazards, identifying options for management and taking actions and monitoring the efficacy. So this is the first example that I'll go through, and that was as much words that you're going to see in the slides. It's all going to be photos and maps from now on. This is the interactive decision support tool that we built for Long Island Sound near New York County in the US. And you can see it's very interactive. We built it, it's online, and you can go and play with the various layers to see what is most important to you as decision makers, and focusing on various variables. This is addressing, visualizing the impacts of hazards. This is a 2050. We have various scenarios for sea level rise with and without storms. And the main point that I would make here is that really the combined effect of sea level rise and storm surges is really, really important. And for coastal areas, you do need to manage for both and address both of them simultaneously. What we saw is that there are many management agencies that only deal with sea level rise, for example, and they're generally environment agencies, and you have the hazard agencies that deal with storm surges. It's pretty much the same effect. You're dealing with inundated areas, but each one is doing it in their corner and they're not coming together. So that was the first one. How do I look back? The first one was, sea level rise, no storm, 2015, high intensity model. You add storm surge on some of that, and you can see that your impacts are totally different. So, the tools enables you to actually compare the same area and run various scenarios together, so you can see what would work for you. And it will totally be dependent to the decision maker whether they are conservative or not. And certainly in the United States, climate change is not very considered still, so you have to get easy on them on climate change impact. The social vulnerability, we've worked with an index that combines various variables, very comparable to the presentation we've seen earlier, except that when you visualize it, it's really easy to see where are your most vulnerable communities concentrated and help you target these decisions. Similarly, looking at some of the economic impacts, so these are, for example, the costs of rebuilding the infrastructure, and see where decision makers would focus most, and where the highest costs would be. As you know, in disaster, some of the most critical facilities like fire, hospitals, and so on, mapping these would be important. And I would make a plug for governance. Some of the regulatory boundaries are slightly different. That would involve slightly different agencies, and so understanding these would be important. This is the flood boundary when you have 1% of annual chance flood hazard. You have, in this county, it's dealt with by one agency, and when you go beyond that, it shifts to another agencies, and it helps saying who should be at the table. One thing that we did was trying to understand the potential for natural solutions to actually help sort of the community. Salt marshes was the ecosystem that would provide the most buffer, particularly against storm surges and floods. And what we run a model for their migrations with climate change and with sea level rise. As sea level rise goes higher, they will go more inland, and they have a chance to migrate inland. And we try to map that and combining this with some of the vulnerabilities where your most vulnerable communities are, and where are the marshes that have most of the coastal protection potential. These are most of the areas where you do need to protect more than others. So that was a participatory tool. One of the examples that we had from that tool, is that it's really, because it is interactive, it enables your decision makers to choose what works for them and what's most important for them, both the decision makers but also the communities. And as we were developing this, it was, someone asking, oh, could we do this? And actually we needed to change a little bit. So it really was responding to the needs. We did a similar thing, although the medium was slightly different in the Solomon Islands. The challenge that we had, we were working on adaptation in the village of Boy in Choiset province. And it was very difficult to have an interactive tool going with GIS and computers to these local communities. It really would not speak to them, and even maps would not speak to them. So we had to adapt the concept, and we actually worked on the maps, but turned it into a three-dimensional model of their island. And that enabled it to be very interactive with the community. So we worked the models of sea level rise and a computerized thing, but we built the 3D model of the island together with the community, and they made all the coloring. And so it was very much interactive, trying to explain the impacts of sea level rise to them, for them to put the points on their map, saying where the houses were, where the villages were, where the fishing grounds were. It was really very good. And it also was a very good way to try to capture traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge together, because we learned as much, even more from them than what we provided as information. And this was the example of having them interacting with the land use planning, considering various scenarios. It was a big map, pretty much half the size of this room, and they were all with the chiefs and everyone in the community participated. That was very interesting to have. So it was led by a community that enabled all members to be involved in the land use planning. It really helped visualize abstract concepts, and I think this is one of the advantages of these tools, is that it helps you put a face to some of the impacts and see it, whereas if you only talk about it, it remains abstract. It enabled capturing and integrated local and traditional knowledge, but climate change into context of other issues, and shared across communities. Because one of the funny stories is that some people that were living on this side of the island never made it to the other side of the island, never understood it, and so just bringing everyone together, that really helped put it in a context. I just go for a few minutes more on how do you design natural solutions to better respond to hazards. And I think this is, working certainly from the conservation community, we really need to change sometimes some of the criteria that we use for conservation and management of the habitat, so that we better provide solutions to disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. What you see here are oyster reefs. They pretty much, they're barriers, pretty much, very much like your, I wouldn't see seawalls, I can't remember the English name of the the barriers that you see in C. But anyway, what we've measured is the wave attenuation potential when you have a reef and when you don't have it, and modeling that, and modeling with all the wave and wind models here. We've developed a dashboard system that enables decision makers to say, okay, what is it that's most important for me? Is it a shoreline erosion? Is it natural resource dependence? Because these are fisheries resource as well. You can choose what's most important for you. This enabled us to design the restoration projects and to place them to better respond to the objective that's most important to the decision makers. So this was, the previous one was, all things equals. These are where these are the placement that would enable you to provide the highest objectives. And if you choose, a more scoring on shoreline and natural resource dependence, then you have slightly different placements. And that really helped guide our restoration efforts of these auto reefs to better respond to disaster risk and natural conservation objectives together. So a lot of this information is already available online in a website called coastalresilience.org. You can log in there. You will find all the mapping, and they're very interactive, so you can play with the models, choose the geographies, and go around and see a lot of the information and the resources and the references that we have used for many of the indices that have been developed is already online, so you can go there and see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very good and to the point presentation of a very useful tool that can be used. I have a couple questions, but let's see if there's some questions from you in terms of Iman's presentation. Pete,
Yeah, I'm a councillor of my local municipality as well. And if I get these type of presentations for things that might happen because I'm living along the River Rhine, I always get a lot of cynicism from the other parties. I'm a Social Democrat party, because they don't want to hear it. And there are always so-called scientists denying that these things are happening. So, what are you doing when you are confronted with this type of things? When you show, for instance, the city of Manhattan with possible flood surges and things like that, and then people, this is just all nonsense. This is simply not true.
As I said, working in the US in a climate skeptic environment, you couldn't really choose a tougher. It's much tougher than Germany, I can assure you.
Well, I'm from Holland.
Sorry.
Don't never say to a Dutchman that is. German may be another Dutch dialect.
Just say Rhine, and I'm at the end of a very long day. Apologies. The good thing about having a variety of models is that it enables you to see if you have a very conservative society, and when you bring various people together and various perspectives together, then it becomes what's the risk that the community is, what's acceptable to the community as a risk, and what's an acceptable risk and what's not. When they see that some of the impacts are really big, and that has pushed for proactive action. When they see that the impact, economic impact, the human vulnerability impact, the people that may need to be relocated, so on. The question to the decision makers, particularly when you put them together with their constituency and the people that they are accountable for, becomes: Am I willing to take that risk of not doing anything and then losing all of this? And I think having a transparent and participatory process really forces a dialogue between various actors within the community, and forces for transparency and more action by decision makers, and that certainly has been the case in New York. So and in the United States. So they didn't go for the 2018 nor the more extreme kind of climate scenario, because one of the things that I really didn't talk about is that your uncertainty level and that have been mapped, but they went for 2050 scenario of the moderate climate rise impact. So,
Question.
I wanted to ask you more about the communication project in Solomon Island, and often the case that we are asked to demonstrate the impact of that communication workshop, like donors, they ask us to measure it. But then, are you also trying to influence people's not just the perception but also future behavioral changes?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, how can you quantify that kind of changes in the short term, right after the communication workshop, particularly in relation to the donor organization?
right. I mean, what we did in the Solomon Islands was at two levels. One is, you're working in the Solomon, you have to work with communities, and at some stage you need to link it to a provincial plan. I think there were commitment from some of the chiefs of the villages, and some direct decisions that they have taken in their traditional and customary rights, and how to the future planning of their housing, and moving some houses up.